Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm Joanna from EPIM. Today's topic is opportunities for Macao in emerging source markets in the APAC region. This webinar will include a market analysis of Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, and you will get to understand the unique needs and preferences of each market. To start, I would like to invite Ms. Elaine Wong, Director of EPIM, to deliver us a welcome speech.
Hello, good afternoon, all my dear friends from the industry. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you attending this webinar today. Special thanks to our consultant, Ruth, for organizing this webinar, and especially to thanks Patrick, the managing partners, and Porix to being the speakers today. They are very experienced and expert. They have deep understanding of the APAC MICE industry development. This year, EPIM has been organizing the industries to participants in several MICE events and roadshows, including the Meeting Shows Asia Pacific in Singapore, IMEX Frankfurt, and IT and CMA in Bangkok, and a series of roadshows in APAC. Through these promotions, not only business cooperations were made, the brand recognitions of MICE Square, Macao and Hengqin was also greatly enhanced. Today's webinars will introduce market contents, demand, and outreach strategies towards APAC's market. As a public organization dedicated to improving and growing the Macao MICE industries, EPIM plays a significant role in differentiating, analyzing, and selecting suitable market segments to attract potential event organizers and professional visitors. We believe that all of you will enhance your understandings of the market trends of APAC regions throughout these webinars. Hence, the government's integrated resources and the industries can work together to achieve the most effective goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you for your ongoing support of our webinar series, which ensures that the MICE community in Macau has access to the most recent trends, thought leadership, and access to best practice. Good afternoon, everybody. You're very, very welcome wherever you're tuning in from in the APAC region, but particular welcome, obviously, to our friends in Macau. This afternoon's session, the name of our webinar is Opportunities for Macau in Emerging Source Markets in the APAC region. And as we all know, this region is a region of dynamic growth and great opportunity for Macau. And we will look at some of those destinations, source markets like Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, chance to understand the characteristics of those markets. We'll also look at the best practices in terms of what's happening in terms of trends in the marketplace. And we'll also look at the preferences of the event organizers and indeed the attendees and what effective strategies we can use in order to attract and cater for these needs. Now, that's a very tall order. We've got 1 hour, but we're lucky to have an amazing set of speakers, and I'm really happy to be joined. Let me give you a quick introduction, which will be only a short introduction to their very, very long CVs, let me tell you. So first, I'd like to introduce Ron Anderson, who is an event industry veteran. I mean, Ron has decades of experience in creating award-winning business events. He's now the co-founder and current Chief Experience Officer for Realm Events Australia. Ron brings a deep knowledge of the APAC region, both as a source market and as a destination. So you're very welcome, Ron, and lovely to have you with us. Moving on to my old friend, Selena Sinclair. Selena headed up the iconic global event company TUI, owned Pacific World. She then moved across. She's many hats. She then headed up the business events division for Destination Gold Coast, and she finally and currently is serving as Chief Executive Officer for Realm, and she is based in Singapore. You're very welcome, Selena.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Sydney, an American living in Dublin, and we're very happy to have you, Sydney. Sydney is a key member of the Sulnua team. She came to Dublin to complete her MBA at the prestigious University of Trinity. And if there is somebody who has the most encyclopedic knowledge of what's happening in our industry, and Sydney will be looking at the trends and giving us the benefit of our insights. And last but certainly, very definitely not least, is my best friend and co-founder of Sulnua, Pádraig Gilligan. Pádraig acts with many hats as well. He is the Chief Marketing Officer for the Society of Incentive Travel Excellence, and he also is consulting with many organizations, destinations, hotels, associations, and of course is focus. And he tells me his really in his heart, his favorite destination in the world is, of course, what, Pádraig?
Macao.
Great answer. So, let's go right into the our title of our today's webinar is what opportunities are there emerging in the emerging source markets of APAC?
Thanks, and thanks to all who are watching and listening to today's webinar. We're looking forward to coming back to Macau next month and working then to build the profile and the awareness of Macau, because it is a truly wonderful destination. So geopolitical tensions in Europe and the Middle East, as well as elections practically everywhere in the world, but particularly in the USA, are dominating headlines, and they're diverting us from the good news of economic growth, because there is quite a lot of very good news about economic growth. And a lot of that economic growth is actually happening in the APAC region. I think we've all heard of the BRIC countries, and they were very prominent in the news over this past week because they did convene a meeting of the original BRICS, which would be Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, along with a number of aspiring BRICS. But if you look at the BRIC acronym, BRICS, two of these major emerging economies or economic powerhouses in many respects are in the APAC region, India and China. Both continue to grow, with India projecting growth of about 6.5% for 2025, compared with about 4.5% for China. So again, these are very, very impressive growth figures. But there are other APAC countries then that are emerging. And with their emergence, obviously, comes the rise of their prominence as a source market for business events. So in a way, if Macau has identified a certain number of source markets today as being the ones that can generate business for Macau, I think one of the purposes of our seminar is to help you to understand that there's probably a second tier or a second level of emerging destinations or emerging source markets that you need to start looking at. For example, Philippines is projecting growth of 6.2%. That's a phenomenal growth rate. Vietnam is actually at 6.5%. And Bangladesh and Cambodia both have growth rates of 6% and above. Indonesia, that too has a strong growth rate of 5.2. So you can see there are many emerging source markets for business events beyond the traditional ones that we tend to turn to. And also remember, we've put this figure on the slide that's on the screen at the moment. Also remember that the size of the MICE market in China alone is estimated to be worth 75 billion. So obviously there's lots of opportunity for Macau in near and almost near source markets. Pat.
Thanks, Pádraig. Amazing figures. Very, very impressive. By the way, if there are any questions from our audience, please put them in the chat and I'll make sure I get those questions to our panelists. It's probably a good time now to bring in Sydney to have a look at the APAC region in general. So give us an overview of the trends, and let's look and see if any of those countries that Porrick identified in fact appear in Sydney's research. Sydney, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you, Porrick, for getting us started. Already a lot of great discussion today, and I hope I can add to it. And thank you, Macao, as well, for hosting all of us. I know we're all very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'll hopefully not throw too many stats out there, but just to give you a sense of kind of, I want to start with maybe what the industry at large observed in 2024. So this is sort of a high level idea of what different industry voices predicted for the year that we're just about to close out here. You can maybe use what's here to gauge your own performance as a company, see where your business activity kind of fell in line with these larger projections. So just to start, Porrick did already touch on the valuation of China's markets, but I thought it was interesting here that one industry source, Hosts Global, which is a global D&C consortium, had predicted that the business events industry in Asia Pacific specifically would reach a valuation of $38.45 billion by the end of this year. I think it was pretty universal consensus as well that the primary source markets coming out of kind of the Asia Pacific side of things are India and China. You certainly saw those names tossed around by really essentially kind of any major industry publication. A lot of associations have busy chapters and busy activity in those regions. So definitely kind of, I think, what the world is watching. If you look ahead to kind of another data source, Cvent, which is a big technology platform in the MICE industry right now, they put out annual lists every year of what people are booking through their platform, and they publish rankings of things like different meetings and event hotel properties and destinations. And if you zone in on the list they published in June of the top APAC meeting hotels, 5 of the top 10 were in Singapore. Other destinations that made that top 10 were Australia's West Coast and then Thailand and Malaysia properties as well. So certainly in line with some of those source markets that we've already identified that you both have teased to already here, Porrick and Pat. And then one other source that I like to consult, or one other source that I think is interesting, is the Amex GBT Global Forecast. So they put this out every year, usually in kind of what the Western Hemisphere, sorry, Northern Hemisphere would consider the autumn time, usually right around IMEX America. So if you look at there's all kinds of good data and statistics in that resource. But if you look at their 2024 global forecast, you can see the statistics on the right side of the screen here of what people were predicting in terms of the different event formats that we would see in Asia Pacific specifically. So you can see that 42% thought that bookings would be delivered in person, 29% of business booked was expected to be a virtual event, and 29% of business booked was expected to be a hybrid event delivery. So again, you can kind of use this to benchmark, see where your own company, your own business patterns fell, whether you're on the buyer or the supplier side. You can see if you were in line with what we thought would happen this year. But jumping into the good stuff, kind of looking at what's predicted for the year ahead, so you can start to build your own forecasts and build out your own plans for the next 12 months here. As I mentioned, that Amex GBT report comes out every year. It was the 2025 edition was just launched a couple of weeks ago, I believe, at IMEX America. The team usually does a couple of presentations and panel sessions. So I've pulled a couple of the highlights that I thought were most interesting and most relevant for our audience here today, starting with what you see on the slide in front of you, which is the idea of how budgets and how meeting spend will increase or decrease for the year ahead. So the good news is that if you take those, I think it's the last 3 columns on the chart here in terms of whether budgets will increase, you see the big takeaway in that blue circle at the bottom there, where 70% expect their meeting spend to increase in 2025. So this is a pretty big jump from only 57% who thought they would see that in 2024. I think it's an open question and maybe one we can poke at and explore later. In terms of whether that's just keeping up with inflation and rising costs, or if it truly is greater further investment in meetings. But certainly good news either way, that you'll at least have more cash flow to play with when we're planning and building out these events. The second finding, again, you can kind of think back to what we just saw in those 2024 stats and predictions. But if Amex asked again for Asia Pacific respondents, what kind of booked business, how that would be delivered. And you can again see the breakdown here. So half of respondents in the Asia Pacific region expect booked business to be delivered as an in-person only event. 26% are expecting booked business to be virtual events. And then the remaining percentage there are expecting booked business to be a hybrid event again. So you're still seeing all three formats find relevance, kind of find a place still in 2025. I know I was just actually at a hybrid event last week in Stockholm, so not in Asia Pacific, but was really impressed at how sophisticated that delivery format has gotten, and the different ways and tools people are still playing with and bringing into this space. So nice to see that there's still a place for sort of all three of those formats there. Finally, I guess I've got two more findings to go. We know that Macao is interested and has it on kind of its own strategic planning in becoming a green MICE destination or a sustainable MICE destination. So again, I'm happy to affirm that according to respondents from this Amex GBT research, that is a significant priority for event planners. This same study, the same body of research found that 61% of APAC respondents to this year's survey say that sustainability is very or extremely important to their organizations when they're planning meetings and events. And what you see on screen here are different current sustainability practices that Asia Pacific organizers and suppliers are putting in place right now. I wanted to call out that the kind of top ranking practice here, the one that's on the very left of your screen, actually isn't kind of a green practice or something that's environmentally focused, but the top practice, according to respondents from the region, when it comes to sustainability, is thinking about how their events really touch on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when we talk about sustainability, I think in 2025, we're really seeing this idea that it's not just about being green or being, using recycling and things like that. It's really about that social side of sustainability as well, just as something that's important to keep in mind there. And then finally, I think on sessions like this, everyone likes to know what destinations are trending. I think for Macao, this is helpful when you think about different competitor or comparator organizations that you might want to look to for the year ahead. So this is, again, just it's one company's rankings. These will change based on who and what you look at. But just to give you a sense of what destinations are trending according to Amex GBT, you've got Singapore in the first slot, Tokyo in second, Bangkok. Those rankings did not change. And then you see Hong Kong sneaking up the rankings a bit, coming in fourth. And then in fifth, you have got, my slides covered there, you got Sydney, which again is kind of, I think, Hong Kong and Sydney flipped positions there. So again, kind of just good destinations to keep in mind when you're thinking about who you might want to look to for competitor or comparator regions there. But with that, I think that's a whistle-stop tour of the region, I know, in about 5 minutes. So
thank you so much.
Back over to you, Pat.
Yeah. Sydney, that was wonderful. I think that the good news for Macao is very clearly if business events are going to Hong Kong, well then there's absolutely zero reason why they can't go to Macao. I think we've got a proof of concept there in terms of distance and type of destination and so on, which is really good news. Just remind you once again, if you do have any questions at all, if you please use the Q&A box on this Zoom call, and we'll keep an eye on that and come back to those questions in due course. But in our pre-webinar promotion, we specifically called out some source markets. And now what we'd like to do is to bring in Ron and Selena to help with this. Australia was one of the markets that we said we'd look at. And it's a market you know very well, Ron, both as a source market and as a destination, which is great to be able to talk to both. If we compare Australia with the emerging economies in other parts of the APAC region, economic growth projections for Australia are actually very modest by comparison. The countries that we talked about previously, we were looking at 6%, 6.5%. But for Australia, we're looking at just around 2.5% for the next couple of years. That said, Australia is a very, very mature marketplace for business events, both inbound and outbound. So Ron, can you give us an overview of Australia as a source market for meetings, conferences, and events? Where are Australians booking, and what specifically are they looking for?
Thanks, Porrick. Yeah, you're right. We are a mature market here in Australia, and even though we're quite large geographically, we don't have a very large population. So the good news is that we are all accustomed to traveling, both for leisure and for business. So everywhere is a long way for us. So every time that we have to travel, it's a long way, unless we're going to New Zealand, which is only a few hours. But everywhere else is significantly long compared to other people in the world. So we're a country and a population that are prepared to travel for business events. And I'd like to sort of, I guess, explain, I call them the rings of travel. So obviously the first place that we all go for business events is locally around Australia. And some of you might not know, but just to get from one side of Australia to the other is a 4-hour plane ride. So, traveling around Australia is still significant. So domestically and short haul international are our first points of travel for business. So that's everywhere in Australia, New Zealand, some of the Pacific Islands like Fiji is not too far for us. Then we get our medium or short to medium international travel. So that covers Southeast Asia, think Bali, Thailand, Vietnam, even as far as Singapore, even Central Asia and the UAE, so Hong Kong and Macau, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and if we go the other way, even Hawaii. So we call that sort of that medium international flights. And then we've got our long haul international. So that's when we're talking about North and South America, Europe, etc. And as those rings, I guess, get further and further away, the further away they get, that travel is usually reserved for incentives only. So for your meetings and associations, for example, that they are the closer in rings. So domestically, and that short haul international. So the further away from Australia we get, that's when it usually becomes smaller amounts of delegates and usually incentives rather than meetings, just because of the time that it takes to get to places. The second thing you asked there, Porrick, was what Australian buyers look for in our destinations for business events. The first one is always the relevance to the destination, to the audience. So if it's if it's an association, then the destination has to have something to do with the association, whether it be an area of expertise or a large amount of the delegates are from that destination, or a large amount of customers are from that destination. Is there a strategic reason to go to that destination? Ease of access is also very important, as it is for everybody. So ideally, direct flights. So if there's a direct flight, then it's top of the list. 2 flights are very reasonable for business events from Australia. As soon as you get more than 2 flights, it starts to become a bit of a hindrance. There's got to be some really great reasons to get there if there's more than 2 flights. Suitable venues or conferencing, that's a given for pretty much everybody on this call, I would assume. Space that suits the proposed agenda. Straight after that, at the same time as accommodation options that are close to the venue or venues. So for conferences, same hotel or hotels that are a similar level, so that everybody is in the same sort of level of accommodation. Or for associations, a range of hotels to suit different budgets. If the conferences are buy-in and delegates are purchasing their own accommodation. So that's a little different. For incentives, it's properties that feel like a destination in themselves. And of course, service that goes into that. So you can see by the different types of business events that different accommodation venues are relevant. And it's great for Macau that you've got all of those different options. You've got a great hotel inventory in Macau, close to each other, close to venues. So that's a really big tick. The next one is value for money. I'm not saying price. Price is not the big driver from Australia, but value for money is. And also pleasing for everyone in this call is that Macao has that in spades too. The size and space of your hotel rooms, for example, you get a lot more for your money than if we go all the way across to the US or somewhere like that. So that's really good. The next one, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is funding assistance. So depending on the size of the group, most destinations offer some sort of funding assistance when it comes to large associations, conferences, or even incentives. So local tourism bureaus are willing to assist to get major events to their destinations for the benefit of the local economy. We also look for destinations that, I guess, get it. I know that's a very general thing to say, but do the local operators understand the desired outcomes of what we're trying to achieve? And lastly, this is definitely not last in the list, but ease of operation. So language, culture, cuisine, etc. Will the delegates of our business events feel comfortable, or what I like to say, comfortably challenged? A good DMC in a destination who can relate to the buyers and really understand where everyone's coming from is worth their weight in gold when it comes to choosing a destination. Does that cover it, Porrick?
Oh, very, very comprehensively. Thank you so much for that. Can I actually ask just a follow-on question in relation to, in particular, the association sector? And I give you an example from our side of the world. So associations in the greater Europe are often kind of divided into sub kind of continental brackets. So for example, UK and Ireland, there are associations that cover those two regions. And then there are kind of European associations. And then there are some that actually cover everything. What way typically, and I'm saying this in particular for any of the professional conference organizers or the hotels who are listening on this webinar, who are wondering, like, how would I target an association in Australia? Is Australia its own region in terms of, you know, like that UKI? Do you have an Australia and New Zealand because they both speak English or whatever, and they're both Commonwealth countries? Or do Australians tend to belong to general kind of pan-Asian associations?
It really depends on the size of the association. If like some medical associations, for example, have very strong Australian contingencies because a lot of research comes out of Australia for medical. If it's a smaller association, we're really lumped in with sort of, you know, that pan-Asian. So it varies depending on the size. I can't really give you a definitive answer there, but it's worth just doing your homework there and looking at the size and looking at the different chapters, which is really easy to do. All of the associations usually have a website and that has the chapters clearly laid out. So that would be your first point of call.
Very, very good. And Pat, we're very familiar with that from previous work that we did ourselves. It's all about the homework.
Absolutely, and all about understanding the attendee. Ron, before I jump in with Selena, I love your image of the ring. So in future, in my mind, you will be known as Lord of the Ring. But let me just ask you one question, because I think it's important, as you rightly said, to understand the delegate or the event organizer's mindset. I heard you saying Macao fits in that middle ring. So. Yeah. Is it true that Australians, I mean, the good news is the source market, that Australians psychologically are open to traveling once that travel is, you know, hasn't got more than 2 flights in it. So the distance is not an immediate barrier. Would that be true to say?
No, that's true. When there were direct flights to Macao, it was a very easy sell. But once you explain to a client that even if you can't fly direct into Macao, you fly direct to Hong Kong, and there's a short ferry or train across, like it's or even coaches now. It's not a drama at all. Everyone knows how easy it is to get to Hong Kong. We've got multiple flights that go direct to Hong Kong daily, so it's not an issue at all. Think about if you fly into Hong Kong airport and you can be in Macao, like, you know, an hour or so after you get you've got your bag. It's pretty simple, not a problem at all.
Sure, and multiple ways as well of going by land and by sea.
And Patrick, I'm going to add something. I know it's not my section. Sorry.
No, this is why you're the
I
expert.
have a comment on that, and which is also a bit leaning back to what Sydney shared about the competitor set that came up on the MX data. A big question is always the rate of exchange between the destination that you're based in and the country that you're working in. And it's actually something that if you look at the Australian dollar right now, for an example, versus the US dollar. So, we ourselves also operate in some of the Southeast Asian destinations that are quoting in US dollar right now, right? This is increasingly an issue for the Australian market, because the exchange of the dollar versus the US dollar is not favorable for the Australian market. So if you are looking at competitors and you are looking at how to gain market share, tracking your source markets versus the exchange, not only of your dollar, but of your competitor set dollar, can let you see where to tap into opportunities or compare yourself to other destinations. Certain destinations, like Indonesia, for example, used to be very cost effective. But with these fluctuations in the exchange, actually, that's not necessarily true anymore. So you may have outdated views of who you think is on par with your price set based on this question of the rate of exchange. So if it's something that you're not looking at as an industry or players in the industry in Macau, I think it's something definitely keep your eye on and see how to make it an advantage rather than a disadvantage to obtain market share moving forward.
It's really interesting what you say, Selena, in particular, given the sort of the fluctuations in the dollar itself, and
it's a lot.
likely further fluctuations within another 2 weeks when there's a kind of a result to to an election in the United States is going to have a massive impact on the value of the dollar. Yeah.
And the Australian market, I can also comment that, because we see the demand in the Asian destinations, which obviously if we include Macau in that competitor set, go up and down based on how cheap it is to go to Europe. So in the end, we saw a lot of demand coming out of the Australian market into the Asian destinations right post the COVID pandemic period, because it was a little bit more comfortable. It was obviously more affordable then. But as soon as Europe became more affordable again, we lost our share dropped quite considerably in those destinations. So also, an Asian or a European cycle is often common. And it's not only for the Australian source market, it's the same for the Singapore source market, which I know I'm going to talk about, but also the American source market, which we already know, that they do rotate a lot of the programs to an Asian or a European cycle. So you need to get in the Asian cycle. And so this is when you're really looking at, okay, are they coming back to my region next year? And how do I get in front of them at the right time? Is it 1 year out, 2 years out, et cetera, et cetera? So these are the kind of things in the terms of commercial strategy that you can research and look at.
Super point, Selena. Thank you for reminding of us. Can I now take you on that journey to your own location, which is Singapore, which I suppose in many respects is often misunderstood as being purely a destination where meetings and events professionals bring their business. But as a source market, can I ask you to deep dive, as Ron has done, to give us a profile of, what are the event organizers looking for who are based in Singapore, and what are the attendees? Give us a sense of how we should pitch our business in Macau to that market.
Okay. Well, I can't beat the Lord of the Rings because nothing's that far. So this is one of the things about living in Singapore. Obviously, I think everyone knows that geographically it is perfectly located. So you have a lot of selection and a lot of choice when you're looking at destinations to go to. In terms of association, I'll just cover that off first. The majority of the decisions of the major associations around the world are still taking place in the US or in the European headquarters. We don't have a lot of association decisions that are taking place in Singapore. We host a lot of meetings in Singapore, but I wouldn't say it's a huge source or a source market, particularly for the association sector right now. However, of course, corporate meetings, incentives, and large events, we have a lot of the Asian headquarters for international companies that are based in Singapore, or of course Hong Kong, as you all know. So because of that, there is a lucrative market, of course, to obtain, particularly the corporate segment. Personally, our company, we work with a lot of legal, banking, consulting practices firms, pharmaceutical companies also all have quite large offices and presence in Singapore itself. And a lot of those pharmaceutical meetings where they're going around the region are decided from their Singapore headquarters. We also have, and I think it's a market that we certainly also focus on, particularly for the incentive segment, a lot of multi-level marketing companies, which we know are huge spenders in the event arena. Both based in Singapore, but interestingly, in the last few years, a lot of them have relocated across the border to Malaysia. So I'll extend it from Singapore to Malaysian source market. A lot of the big name MLM companies are now Malaysia based, not necessarily Singapore based, or they have a presence in one, but most of their employees sitting over the border in Malaysia. So that's definitely in terms of industries where there are a lot of companies that are organizing all sorts of meetings and events all around the region, and obviously much further than only Asia and the Pacific. The other segment that I'd say is interesting to pay attention to is the luxury segment. We have a lot of the high-end luxury brands that are doing brand activations and other events where they travel to multiple destinations around the region. So yeah, I would say that definitely the corporate segment is very strong. In terms of what they look for, look, it's exactly the same as what Ron shared about the Australian market. If we understand what the client's objectives are, we understand what they're trying to achieve, and as a destination, we tailor our proposal to meet those needs or those brand objectives, you are going to have the ingredients that you need to have a chance to capture that type of business. I think beyond that, safety and security of destinations is something that is becoming much more top of the agenda. We have, of course, some companies who have concerns about going to certain destinations in Southeast Asia, particularly sometimes coming out of Singapore. And so if you can just make sure that, how you're catering to all of those things are really clear to clients in the initial briefing, I think, yeah, Macau is a great destination. I've been there once only. And I think it's one of those uncovered places right now. But yeah, clients are always looking for somewhere they haven't been before. And that becomes increasingly difficult. So I think there could be definite opportunities for the Singapore source market.
Fantastic. Selena, I know you put an emphasis, and rightly so, on brand activation, corporate meetings, incentives. I just want to go back to the association market and ask you if the main global rotating associations are headquartered in the US or in Europe, are there regional associations that are headquartered in Singapore that might be of interest?
There are some. Honestly, it depends again on the sector, tech sector particularly. There are a number of associations that you can look at and target that have a presence here. But again, similar to what Ron said, I think it's about looking at where are the global headquarters, where are their regional hubs, where are they located, and how can I target them from there? There are some here, but yeah, rather than listing a few, yeah, of course, there are these options, but it really depends on the sector that you're targeting association-wise.
And the good news is Macau has a very clearly defined segmentation policy, and tech falls into that. So it's really, really good.
Okay.
Can I ask you, because
I was going to jump in, Selena, if you don't mind. I was going to ask you a little bit about, say, Indonesia or Jakarta, like as opposed to Bali, Indonesia, Jakarta, Indonesia. In other words, the kind of the business side. In your business as the CEO of Realm, you have destinations in different Asian kind of hubs and locations. Is Jakarta a place that you're going to seek business?
Not right now. We don't do that. In saying that, we have had requests from companies based in Jakarta. It's not a source market we've personally focused on, but I saw your figures, so maybe we should be. But no, not right now. The events we have done from that source market have been very government-based events, actually. But not for corporates, not for companies coming out of there right now. So yeah, maybe I should also start thinking about that.
Very good, very good. Sydney, I'm going to bring you back in if you don't mind. Just from a demand generation perspective, we actually had a discussion ourselves over the last week, and you were highlighting some of the very innovative ways that Singapore, and actually Hong Kong too, are targeting associations and conference organizers. Would you mind sharing some of those? There may be something that we can actually replicate in Macau.
Sure, of course. So I think earlier this year we did a study of a lot of different convention bureaus or destination organizations, DMOs, just to get a sense of sort of what that marketplace looks like. And I think as many a business event professional would tell you, Singapore is often quoted or cited as an exemplar in many ways, as is Macau. But one thing that Singapore does that's really interesting that kind of jumped on our radar is a program they have called Inspire. I think it's actually Inspire 2.0 because they've revamped it this year. But it's one of several subvention or kind of incentive schemes that the destination offers to planners. And what it essentially is it's a curated suite of, I think, about 80 different experiences or access that the Singapore DMO exclusively can give to planners who qualify and who meet different standards. So if anyone's curious, I can stick the link for the program in the chat after this, just so you can take a peek at how they market it and how they position it. But again, I think it stood out early for us this year as kind of a long-standing program that Singapore has offered. And then I think to your point, Pork, what we found interesting when you and I were chatting earlier this week is that I saw a news release that came out from Hong Kong's destination organization that was talking about the idea that Hong Kong has also since introduced a similar scheme this year. I think they actually have about 100 different experiences in theirs, but it's the same model of Hong Kong as a DMO has put together different attractions or things that they can give planners exclusive access to that are meant to be almost sort of add-ons or supplements to the bulk of your event program. So it's okay, you've got a really good, really thorough local ambassador-led program during the day. This is now a kind of special dinner you might get, or behind the scenes shopping access, or exclusive kind of preview or after hours access to a really bespoke cultural institution. Again, thinking of India as a source market, one of the ones that Singapore does, for example, is you can get a behind the scenes tour of Little India, where they talk about all the spices that participants from the Indian group might recognize or might find familiar or comforting. So it's kind of a way to nicely link and showcase cultures. And I think it was interesting to us that both Singapore and Hong Kong are really touting this as something they're going to market with and actively marketing to planners, I think is what caught our eye.
Very good.
Very interesting strategy. So I'm going to break it into two, both financial incentive or access to a range of really, let's say, motivating experiences, hopefully provided by an excellent destination marketing or management company at that location. And do you think, would you choose one destination over the other if they were available?
Okay, my opinion on this is the experiences-led program is designed to capture attention. Mm-hmm. How many people normally book their activities that way? Well, in my experience, is none. So I'm just being honest. So I feel like it actually is a smart way to assist the industry, because I'm sure if there's any DMCs sitting on the call as well, they're probably thinking, well, that's my job, which is a kind of strange aspect, isn't it? Where you have the DMO really saying, I can do the job of the DMC, right? So it could also be a little bit of a mixed message. But at the end, they're looking to show that the depth and breadth of the options that exist at destination. But once you really start to work with the customer on designing their event, of course, they may bring up a question around, I saw this great idea from the DMO, but really you are the one in the end curating the activities as the DMC. So I think it's a capture mechanism more than anything, and it's a creative way to do that. Financial packages, Ron talked about that as well. Look, in the last 2 years, every event that we have won have had a financial package in place. from the Destination Bureau. It's a huge deciding factor, so that we can't probably get away from when you get to a certain size of program. And I think if I particularly look at the size of the facilities that Macao can offer, it has to be a tool in the toolbox, right? To really see how to attract these big things. They look 3-4 years in advance, and it's part of the decision-making criteria. And they look at this in conjunction with other criteria. So I don't want anyone to think it's the only way people are deciding, because I think it's a really sad industry if that's the case that we get ourselves into, that they are only going places because of the money on the table. But it has to be something that is put in the, I guess, offering mix for things that are looking 3 to 4 years out. For the events that we have won without financial support, I'd say, just as some insights, the reason we've won in a destination over another, because often we bid against each other in realm. So we know why one destination wins over another. And it's not always the financial package, because we don't have maybe some bureaus offering financial packages, because we are in some of the lower income destinations as well. So these are maybe for that next tier meeting size down, the 100 to 500. They decide if everyone can fit in one hotel, number one criteria, always. They decide, is the offsite venue large and wow enough? This is a huge thing. So all of the big companies with lots of money to spend that rotate their events every year, they go to some pretty amazing places for their gala dinners. That's true. They go to the stock exchange in America and take over the bank floor, and they do amazing things. And these people are high income earners. So these lucrative events, you have to have this option. Where can we have dinner on one night that just is going to blow everyone's socks off? And if you have this in your mix, it might even override the financial contribution in some cases. So it's more about what else can you do to compensate for that being such an important decision factor. And the last thing that I would add is around what are the 2 or 3 things that you can add that will really bring the experience to a point that it's unique to Macao. It's not going to happen anywhere else. Because if they know they're going to have these 2 or 3 experiences, they can do the wow evening and they can all stay in one hotel. Okay, the financial thing may or may not be as high up on the ranking. I think the thing that we're all going to be challenged in, and I'm not just talking about Macao, I'm talking about all of us in every destination moving forward, are the high hotel rates that are happening right now. And I don't know Macao's hotel rates, so I'm not commenting at all on this. But also the airfares are getting so high that if we don't have financial contribution, often they just can't afford to come to our destination. So if you can have hotel rates low enough, direct connectivity and hotel airfares, we probably can't control those as much, and all the other ingredients, I think your financial contribution is not so much the key thing. But it depends on all the other things to where it plays a weighting in the decision.
Fantastic, Selena. That's wonderful. Very, very comprehensive, and quite a subtle kind of answer in many respects, because very, very clearly you've got to have a very, very full portfolio of different ways of creating demand for your destination.
Yeah.
The cultural storytelling that's obviously at the heart of the 2 programs that we talked about is crucially important, but also the financial element is too. There are questions coming in, actually a really good question, and thank you for asking it. During webinars like this, we freely kind of pepper our speech with acronyms without explaining them. So DMO is Destination Marketing Organization, or also known as Convention and Visitors Bureau, CVB. But essentially, it's the official, usually state-supported authority in a destination that is responsible specifically for business events. So that's what a DMO would be. A DMC is a destination marketing consultancy or destination marketing company, and that is a commercial activity in a destination that's providing very, very specialist services to business events groups that are coming to that destination. So very, very crucial questions, and thanks for asking them. I'm going to direct the next question to you, Ron, if you don't mind. I'm going to give you kind of a piece of business, and I want to try and understand the process whereby this piece of business would be actually kind of contracted. So, you know, you've got 1,000-person association conference. It's got to go to some destination in APAC. So how would you go about shortlisting the destination? But more importantly, what kind of support would you expect from the DMO, from the Destination Marketing Organization, to help you be able to place that piece of business in that location?
Is this a real piece of business, Porrick, or is this you know, just for the purposes of this webinar?
It's a real piece of business.
Trust me.
All right.
I'm from head office. I'm here to help you, Ron. You know that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. The first thing that I'm sure we all do is we've got to ask lots of questions. And so the first thing I would start when shortlisting is figure out, is there somewhere that fits strategically for this audience, for this brand, for this content? And that's kind of going back to what I spoke about earlier. What makes sense to this audience? And then how long will the event run for? So is it a 2-day meeting, 3-day meeting? Is it a 5-day meeting? Because once you find out how long the event goes for, you then need to ask, how long can these people, these attendees, spend away from their homes, offices, workplaces, etc.? Because that then determines how long they can realistically travel for. So you can see it's all going into logistics, really. It's not the boring part, but it's really important. It's no use saying this event would be great for, you know, Peru, but it takes 3 days to get to Peru, and the meeting only goes for 2 days, for example. The next thing I would ask is, where has this meeting or this event been before? And what destinations were successful, not so successful, and why? So is this a rotation? Does it have to be in APAC? If it's been in APAC before, where did you go before? What worked really well? The suitability of the venues and the accommodation is of course has to be very high on the list. And then it comes to the costs. So this will dovetail nicely into the DMO assistance. But as Selena was just saying, the costs and the value for money, which country has a favorable exchange rate right now? As we spoke about before, the American exchange rate to the Australian exchange rate right now is pretty horrible. It's horrible for Australians going to North America. We're just not doing it right now. We're just going to wait until the exchange rate is more favorable. In Asia, it's a lot more favorable. So what works? What's the value for money? What do we get for our money? And then we start to talk to the DMO. There's 2 things we go to the DMO for. Firstly, is we ask about the feasibility. So we can't know everything about everywhere. So we'll go to a DMO and we'll ask them, we'll say, we've got 1,000 PAX conference coming that we want to consider Macao for example. What's the access? What's the hotel inventory looking like? What's your meeting space look like for 1,000 PAX conferences? Do you have breakouts, etc.? This is stuff that the DMO can help with really, really quickly. And especially when you're looking at a number of destinations, it's a lot of work, as we all know. So if we want to look at just say a short list of 5 destinations, it's a lot of work just to find out how long it takes to get everywhere, hotel inventory, venues, etc. So the DMO is really great at doing that quickly to give us that information, so we can then shortlist. And then finally is this funding assistant part. If we've got 1,000 people, you know, the cold reality is that pretty much every destination will offer some sort of funding assistance to get that 1,000 PAX conference to their destination. So it's not just that they will offer assistance, they can help with the funding criteria. So those criteria are things like how many days the conference has to be, where the delegates have to come from, because in Australia is a good example. A lot of destinations will only offer assistance if more than half of the delegates are coming from outside of Australia. So a lot of businesses like that, they want that international, I guess, visitor rate to come to their destination. So they're really that sort of first point of call when you're considering places to really shorthand that shortlisting process. They can give you that information really quite quickly to say, yep, this is worth looking into further.
Very good. Ron, thank you so much for that. Very comprehensive, and I think a very clear sort of marching orders in relation to how a destination can really reach out and put itself in the first in line to actually receive that 1,000-person conference. Patrick, I'm going to ask you a question, if you don't mind. We've a few minutes left before we actually end this this hour together. But you're just back from ICA in Abu Dhabi. And one of the things that you were doing there was presenting the Best Marketing Award. So, like, I suppose having seen some of the best examples of destination marketing, what advice would you have in relation to Macao at this particular stage in its maturity as a destination for business and events?
Yeah, I'm still asleep, actually. I've just literally come in this morning. First of all, ICA is another lot of spaghetti initials. ICA, it stands for the International Conference and Convention Association. So it's the professional association, not exclusively, but primarily for those who are involved in looking for and servicing association conference meetings. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned, the marketing side, because I'm going to just repeat what our two expert speakers have said. Obviously access, all of the price points, all of the incredible experiences. We're going to take those as a given. So now we're talking about getting attention, because out there at the moment, there is a lot of destinations who are very active in putting their wonderful destinations in front of key decision makers and trying in some way to get through the clutter. So the ICA Marketing Awards this year had a theme of storytelling and the art of marketing. And as you know well, Porrick, very well, the big challenge for a marketeer is to get their message through that clutter, get it to that decision maker so that it is A, heard, B, understood, and C, you actually remember it over an extended period of time. So to have all of those characteristics of a marketing campaign really is very important. And so I would
Pat, to know something, I think the best illustration for what you've said,
yeah,
would be the case study that I'm going to ask Ron to describe to us. We did promise a case study as part of this presentation, and with 3 minutes left, I'm going to ask Ron, because in many respects, what Patrick has said about the sort of the storytelling of the destination, you experienced the storytelling of a destination, and that caused you to act, Ron. So can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I did. Really quickly, I just saw a question come through from Carlo asking about the global hotel chain brands such as Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, etc., whether they are important for Australian and Singapore. And I can speak for Australians, and we do a lot of work with Americans as well. Yes is the short answer. When you're looking at hotels with brand names that you've got an expectation of where they sit in terms of service and quality. That doesn't mean that local hotel brands can't get a look in. It just means they're not known until you get them in there. So I think it's actually really quite important when shortlisting destinations. Just really quickly, yes, it would have been way back in 2007, which is actually a very long time ago, and Macao was really taking off. I think it was a lot of the new hotels and casinos were just being built. I got taken there on a famil post IEBTM in Barcelona, and Crown Hotels, which are based in Australia, took us over there because they had one interim hotel and they were building their big one there. I'd heard of Macao, but I didn't know much about it, and I couldn't believe it. We were going across in the ferry. This was before any roads, and as we were approaching on the ferry, I just saw Las Vegas appear, and I couldn't quite believe it. I was just taken aback at the scale and size of it all, the structure, the infrastructure, and everything. And straight away, it ticked a box for me in terms of something that was unique and not too far away from Australia. So at that time, there were direct flights from Australia with Viva Macao. And I had an ongoing corporate incentive with one of my larger clients, one of the big banks in Australia. So we had an annual conference incentive for 150 people, and it ticked all the boxes, being direct flights, and we actually chartered a plane. Somewhere that most people hadn't been before. Lots of people from Australia go to places like Bali, Thailand, etc. I didn't know anybody who'd been to Macau, and if they had, there weren't many, had really unique cultural elements. So it wasn't just the casinos. Once I got there and I really understood the Portuguese heritage, and when you're walking in some parts of Macau and it looks like you're in Europe, I was just blown away. And so every time I was being, I guess, exposed to these activities and the uniqueness of the destination, I was just blown away. And this is ticking all the boxes. Lots of surprise and delight venues and activities. So it wasn't just the amazing hotels, which were amazing, and these massive casinos, but it was just these really great cultural, historical destinations. The things you could do there, you could cook, you could do all these amazing activities. It was really, really great, and it was great value for money as well. So I went back to my client, and I went in there, and they thought I was mad when I said, "I've got this great idea of where to go next year, Macau," and they looked at me like I'd just landed from Mars. But because I'd just been there, I found it pretty easy to actually sell it in, and why. So, I was lucky enough to have been working with them for a number of years, and they trusted my judgment. So we ran a year-long teaser campaign to excite and incentivize the workforce, and everyone was just super excited. When we actually launched, we chartered a plane, we branded the whole interior of the plane, and we actually ran our business session, which was sort of a mandatory part of reporting back here in Australia, especially for banks. We ran our whole business session on the plane. So on the back of the seats in the monitors, and then using the microphones, we did the full business session through there. We did get to know you games en route. So we got rid of all that sort of stuff on the way. So when we arrived, it was all fun and games. So being a bank, they weren't allowed to stay at a casino, so we stayed at the Westin down at the other end. But then once we were there, we did amazing cultural discovery and immersion activities around the old town, like amazing race style with challenges, like eating challenges, and walking up. I remember that garden you've got there with all the little pebbles. Walking on that, challenges who could walk up there with before they started crying, action adventure with the bungee jumping and the skywalks around the tower, optional activities like golf. We did shopping across the border, spas, sightseeing, cultural off-site dinners, and then we did a gala dinner at one of the casino ballrooms, which was very glitz and glam, and then an after party at one of the big sort of penthouse levels of one of the big casinos. It was incredible, and everybody was blown away. Like they just couldn't believe that they'd just escaped their normal lives working in a bank and had this sort of, I guess, trip to who knows where, which was Macau, where they were just transported to another world for a few days, and that sort of ticked every box in terms of an incentive. So it was, I've got very, very fond memories of that event, and we snuck it in just before the global financial crisis, which was great timing. But it shows that the Australian market, there's a lot there for our market, and you should really go after it.
Fantastic,
Ron. Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to actually finish this webinar. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, and I love that phrase. Like all great webinars, we could go on and on and on, but we need to, when they're so successful. I love your phrase, escape your normal life. I mean, we're all getting so much good content here. So on behalf of Ron, Selena, Sydney, Pork, and myself, thank you to all our listeners, everybody who's stayed on, as we like to do. We like to start in time and end in time, but let's keep the dialogue going. And once again, thank you so much for sharing your insights so generously and with such clarity. Thank you very much. See you shortly. And for those of you who are in Macau, Pork and I and Grania will be there the end of the month.
Yeah. See you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye. Nice weekend.